Good morning, colleagues. So I'm happy to start our sessions this day. So it's a special day at COP29, the Biodiversity Day. So that gives us a good chance to have a discussion on Arctic biodiversity, marine Arctic biodiversity, with a fantastic panel of experts. So my name is Alexander Shostakov. I work as a chief expert for the Moscow State University Marine Research Center. And we have a great panel present here. So, but for the gender balance, we have a colleague online. So who is, I believe, Halder, you are traveling at the moment. So today we will have a good combination of businesses, research, production companies, data managers. So that is a good combination to discuss Arctic biodiversity. And we will hear from the panel, which include Svetlana Schoenfeld, Deputy Director of KEPT. KEPT is one of the Russian leading environmental consultancies, working in a wide spectrum of topics. And I think it will be very interesting to hear this perspective. We also will hear from representative of the Moscow State University Marine Research Center, Olga Konovalova, head of Division of Biodiversity Research, the one who is actually organizing a substantial part of biodiversity research work for the Marine Research Center, working in the field and bringing the data from the field to laboratories and from laboratories to management. We also have with us Halder Johansson. So Halder is joining us online, and he is the director of the Arctic portal, working from Iceland and bringing together enormous amount of data on Arctic, whether it's related to biodiversity or to sustainable development, and great elements of mapping and actually visual representation of Arctic data. We also have today Irina Anufrenia, head of Wildlife Conservation Program for the Russian Foundation, Nature and People. And this foundation is doing specific biodiversity-related work in the Arctic, both related to marine mammals, but also for terrestrial realm. And we also will hear from a real company who really do the big business in the Arctic, one of the biggest in the Arctic. And Irina Fitzgerald, senior manager for Norilsk Nickel, will tell us a practical story. So how the company like Norilsk Nickel, one of the global leader in production of a number of metals, nickel is in the title, but there are way much more products coming from the company. How such a company operating for dozens of years in the Arctic is actually taking seriously the issue of biodiversity, and specifically, I believe, on ecosystem services. So we have a pretty significant program today. And to start, I probably will do a short, brief introduction, painting global and regional context for this discussion. And I will start with a global one. Globally, back to 2022, the Global Biodiversity Framework, known as Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, was negotiated and adopted under the auspices of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And this Global Biodiversity Framework set 4 global goals until 2050 and 23 global targets until 2030. None of them, as we are mostly talking about marine biodiversity in the Arctic, none of them are specific for marine, but all 23 are relevant for marine. Whether we are talking about 100% being under spatial planning or any other form of management, or we are talking about 30% of the global ocean under protection, whether through protected areas or other effective area-based conservation measures, so whether we are talking about target related to control and eradication of invasive alien species, or we are talking on other issues, like, for example, raising the funds for biodiversity globally, including for the ocean work, or we are talking about responsibility of big companies in terms of their reporting, in terms of revealing their risks, in terms of providing a better system of environmental impact assessments, etc. So all one or another way dealing with the marine realm. And what is important that while staying at the global level with those global targets, every party to the convention is supposed to identify their own national targets and establish what is known as a national biodiversity strategy and action plan. And yesterday in the Ocean Pavilion, we had a good discussion on synergies between national biodiversity strategy action plans and climate plans, including NDCs. And by the way, the global biodiversity target has a global biodiversity framework has a specific target on climate change, asking for enhanced mitigation adaptation measures while providing safeguards to ensure that mitigation measures are not negative to biodiversity. So that's a global context we all working on. And if we are talking about Russian Federation submitted their national targets together with almost 130 other countries. And almost 50 countries already adopted the new national biodiversity strategies and action plans, most of them with a time frame until 2030, which, by the way, very well coincide with the Sustainable Development Goals. That's a global context for our discussion. The regional context is maybe a little bit more complex because the regional context very much depends on what's going on in the Arctic among 8 Arctic states, but also with engagement of what is known as permanent participants in terminology of the Arctic Council and the Arctic Council itself. We all know that since 22, Arctic Council is not very much functional and substantial elements of work of the Arctic Council was kind of frozen. It's changing slowly. It's changing slowly, and recently, actually last week, we had the first board meeting of PAIM, and PAIM stands for Protection of Arctic Marine Environment. It's a working group of the Arctic Council. And last week, during several days, all Arctic states, all permanent participants, the 6 indigenous peoples organizations, as well as a good number of observers met virtually for the first time since 22 to discuss the current progress on established projects, but also new projects. And those projects include, for example, the analysis of the environmental situation in the Central Arctic. It includes development of the project on invasive alien species in the Arctic, on other effective area-based conservation measures. It's more than almost 15 projects on shipping in the Arctic, etc. And of course, the further development of ecosystem approach in the Arctic. 2 weeks ago, similar meeting happened for COF. COF is the conservation of Arctic fauna and flora. And for the first time, the board met during 4 days, again, also online. And a number of decisions were made, including a very important one. COF will work on the new action for Arctic biodiversity plan. That will be the Arctic Council strategy for biodiversity conservation. And most probably this plan will come until 2035. So that will be for the next decade. And this plan will include a number of elements very much in line with the global biodiversity framework. And I think that since probably we hope it will be adopted in May 25, during next ministerial conference. So then we all will work in the Arctic, more or less in the frame of this new action for Arctic biodiversity plan. So that is the context, and with this overall context, I like to move to Svetlana and ask Svetlana a question: how the company working with the many businesses, helping businesses to understand risks, helping businesses to understand sometimes what biodiversity means in practice, and helping also companies reporting on what they are doing, how you see what's going on today and what is the direction, whether companies are more interested or not, and how you would like to describe the current landscape in terms of working with companies on biodiversity.
Thank you. Can you hear me, colleagues? Thank you very much, first of all, Alexander, for your great and empowering introduction, and you shared with us so helpful information. Thank you for that. Can we start my presentation, please? So first of all, I would like to highlight that it's really a great opportunity for me to be involved into this session and to discuss with you some approaches to biodiversity risk assessment in the Russian Arctic. So a few words about ourselves. I represent the CAPT consulting company. We work many years, firstly as a part of international consulting, now the Russian original consulting companies with industries in respect to climate change adaptation, biodiversity conservation programs, and other issues of sustainable development, and help companies to mainstream this sustainable development practice into their strategies and operations. And now let's start to the let's go to the Russian Arctic, and the first point that it's the real time now to think about the connection between companies' activities and complex risk assessments of climate risks, biodiversity risk, ecological risk, and social risk, especially in respect to indigenous population. And it's well known that more than 75% of the Arctic territory belonging to our country is water space, and in this case the biodiversity conservation is extremely important for the climate agenda, and economic activities is a source of risks both for the unique ecosystems of Arctic that are habitats and directly to biological species and the climate as a whole. And mitigating these risks requires a response from the companies operating in this region. And in Russia, it's well known that the issue of risks is considered at the national level, and many regulatory and legal acts at federal and regional levels, they set targets, indicators, and of course the indicators to biodiversity at species level too. But not only the national legislation empowers their companies to improve their practice and to assess their impacts and risks in this region. And now, at present, the general approach to accounting for biodiversity risk in Russia is a combination of TCFD and TNFD approaches. And the Russian companies use these recommendations very often because this is the unique and universal instrument to assess risks, opportunities, and to develop their proper strategies for this region. And so we know that for instance, TNFD that introduces the 5 general drivers of nature change due to the industrial activities. First of all, it's of course a climate change, then to the land and ocean use change, then resource use, pollutions and invasive species. And the combination of these 5 drivers, like impacts, can cause the physical risks for biodiversity and transitional risks for the companies as the results of physical risks. But I can share with you the information that many Russian companies had made the practical experience with the TCFD and TNFD in Arctic, and we understand that this is their proper and relevant standards. They can be used for this region, but for example, not all guidances by TNFD can be relevant for Arctic because they focus on ecosystems and on biomes, but they do not include the proper information about this vulnerable and unique Arctic biodiversity. And our first lessons learned that we need to improve this that TNFD guidance to include into them the specifics of Arctic. And when we speak about the specifics of the Russian Arctic, what it's actually we mean. No, actually, we can see them all on the screen. I will not repeat them, but Arctic risk management should take into account a number of characteristics of the regional vulnerable ecosystems. For example, the Arctic is the original home of many endemic species, and it's also important for migratory species. And because of the vulnerability of ecosystems, biodiversity is important for maintaining the connections between them. And Arctic ecosystems are global keepers of natural carbon, which underlines the importance for climate regulation on global level. And finally, we all need to take into account that Arctic is still home for many indigenous people whose lives and closely linked to the natural resources of the region. And one more point about, oh, Irina, sorry.
It's okay. Just move a little.
Okay, one more important point about the ecosystem services in the Arctic. So when assessing impacts and risks on Arctic ecosystems, we need to think, first of all, about ecosystem services in these regions. And the most relevant ecosystem services are the climate and water and resource regulation, climate protection, and support of habitats for biological species, and the preservation of cultural values. And they should be given special attention when assessing risk in these territories. But not only the ecosystem services are the development areas for Russian companies, for actually for all companies working in Arctic. Other areas for improvement include use of scenario analysis and risk assessment, digital solutions and data services in biodiversity research, incorporating the introduction of invasive species and underwater noise into corporate practice, assessing supply chain, I will highlight, and sharing efforts, responsibilities, and opportunities to mitigate risk with other stakeholders. And a few words about the supply chain. Companies can impact Arctic ecosystem even without having direct operation in the Arctic, and it's important to understand when working not only in Arctic but everywhere. And one more point, that modern digital solutions and data services in the field of biodiversity and the new instruments such as mathematical modeling can help all of us. And my last point includes recommendations of biodiversity risk assessments. So we see that the sequence of actions taken by companies after risk assessment should continue due to the development of implementation of appropriate response measures. Risk at any level should be monitored, and with high risks required the development of proper action plans, and critical risks required mandatory equivalent compensations known as like-for-like or better offsets. But we do not know extremely good practice by offsets in marine areas. And this is, so our lessons learned that this is not the right way to hope for the offsets in Arctic. There only one right direction is to the prevention, the avoidance, and the minimizations. And we do not think about compensations. We shall stop on prevention and minimization of risks. And after several projects implementing in Russian Arctic, we understand that it's really long and not easier way for the companies to assess risk assessment and to implement the mitigation hierarchy. But the open, equal, and sustainable dialogue with science, with other stakeholders, can help companies to find the right directions on this way. Thank you much, colleagues.
Thank you, Svetlana. Thanks for setting the scene. As actually, I think the following presenters will elaborate more on a number of those elements. In particular, of course, the data collection, the good establishing the good knowledge base through the monitoring, through the research. But thanks a lot for highlighting specifically the risk element of it, because that's need to be in the essence and the center of the management system. And we may have lots of different data. If we don't understand really how we approach the risk, how we do this assessment, some of those data will stay just on the shelf. So thank you very much. And with that, I like to ask Olga Konovalova to share with us the experiences related to some elements of what we saw in a presentation from Svetlana, related to monitoring, related to study Arctic biodiversity, related to converting this data and this information into actually biodiversity conservation plans. As well as I hope that you will touch upon some elements related to education and bringing the knowledge to wider audiences. I think that while we are waiting for technology to help us, and Svetlana was talking about some digital technologies, so we have an example of it. Okay, so that is on the screen. So Olga, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you, Alexander, and thank you, Svetlana, for the perfect basement of our discussion. Thank you very much. And first of all, 2 words about us. We celebrate 10 years of our activity. Lomonosov Moscow State University Marine Research Center. Initially, we was everybody from our company finished the Moscow State University, so we are closely related to this. And so initially we are based on the scientific research, and then we are implicate this into our activities. So The second that I want to say that, of course, we are talking about climate and we're talking about climate changes. So as a scientist, we should, yesterday in the discussion, there was words about Arctic amplification. So it's important to notice that we have a very dynamic ecosystems and as a scientist, we should remember that we are studying dynamics and the states of arts of our ecosystems, of our biodiversity. And as an ecologist, we need to have a deep understanding of what we get and what we need to do. So, of course, the base of all of these things should be science. We study biodiversity in different ways, and I want to show you the sequence that Alexander told previously. I want to show you a sequence of examples that flows from scientific research to the real implementation, to the mitigation measures, through the monitoring, and through the indicators, measures of ecosystems. So we work in the field, we work in the lab, and then we work with the expert groups, with the companies, with the business, how to deal with all this data. The first is a real biodiversity study that we performed in 2029-2023. It's a scientific research where we studied biodiversity of algae, invertebrates, and of microbiota that related to this components of environment. So it was collecting a huge data of microbiology species from different Arctic seas, and they're all over the Russian seas, to collect and to study interactions between organisms, between microorganisms and the big organisms. And then it go further. So we are now making publication and analyzing all this. And the second, the Alexander previously said that the last week it was a PAIM session about project of the Arctic after the 2 years of the gap. And we put this research as a part of PAIM report because the part of the PAIM report is the report about invasive species. So it was one of the biggest research of invasive species in the Arctic, and this research is most closely related to the climate research, because the most of this invasive migration in the Arctic belong to the climate changes, because we study planktonic ecosystem, planktonic biodiversity, and we just get the whole view of the planktonic biodiversity, and then we analyze which species are maybe alien or non-aboriginal, some of them, and we found 6 species that can be potentially invasive in the Arctic. And some of them can do it because their larvae can spread in the water that became warmer with the climate change. So we need to check it, and we need to put it in the risk assessment, and we need to put it in our mitigation measures or something. And this is the example of research that we perform near the Franz Joseph Island. Honestly, we are working in the Barents Sea for the 8 years, I suppose, and we study foraging resources of the Atlantic walrus. Atlantic walrus is a protected species in the Russian Arctic, and not in Russian Arctic, in the Western Arctic. And the spread of this species can change in different years, and it's related to the dynamics of their feeding resources. And the feeding resources of walrus is the mollusks. So we studied, for 2 years, we studied the feeding resources and the feeding walrus, feeding of walruses by satellite tracking, and we found that the really the most populated, the biggest population of the walruses is living in Franz Joseph Islands archipelago because they have a huge amount of feeding resources. It's the best place for them. This is one of the example how we can put it in our mitigation, and then I will show you like the next and the next slide, and the next I will show how we implement this data in the real measures. So this is I should say it, we had a special session about NSR, Northern Sea Route, and this is our best monitoring program because we develop a lot of monitoring programs of biodiversity and the environment in the Arctic seas, and this is one of the this is the hugest comprehensive program that will further implemented as a state monitoring system. We hope so. And we're waiting for it. And we made a pilot monitoring studies in 2021, 2023. You can see this 50 and 50 and then 47 stations that we studied along NSR and in the ports. And we develop a whole system of the monitoring for each site for indicate the state and the state and dynamics of the ecosystem. And the next is mitigation measures. Basing on the comprehensive program, we can, and based on the previous studies of walruses and polar bears, we can perform mitigation measures on marine mammals, and we are developing with nature and the people together. We're developing these measures on the NSR, the speed limitation in the different zones, or maybe even a prohibition of entering in the protected zones. So it is on the studying of developing for the NSR ecological safety and management. And I want to say about it, we analyze and make a big view on the marine biodiversity of the Arctic in these books. Unfortunately, most of them in Russian, but we hope one day it will be translated. So it's a huge amount of knowledge that we collect is the newest knowledge about the Russian Arctic in the books. And of course, one of the important things, and you see it in opposite of our pavilion, that educational and the program for developing of the youth involving into our projects and our research in biodiversity conservation and in scientific studies. We use it in the floating university, and we usually made a hydrobiology group and some winter school in these universities in the Russian Arctic. And one of the important things that we make an educational trainings for the touristic guides, for the professionals who for the marine mammal observators, etc., making like a photo exhibition for promoting, for spreading information and knowledge about conservation of biodiversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olga. So that's a very impressive set of work, and I think one of your last slides related to a whole set of atlases developed for particular Arctic seas or devoted to particular groups of organisms, like, for example, marine mammals. That, of course, a very significant kind of a final product of many years of work and collecting data and information from a significant number of scientists and specialists to put it together. It definitely will be great to see if those atlases will be available maybe in a digital format, maybe in English, but to be shared with the international community and, first of all, of course, with the Arctic community.
Hope so.
So
Yes, we will.
thank you very much. We actually supposed to come from this presentation to the presentation on some data sets available in the Arctic and specifically the Arctic portal. But as our colleague from Iceland is traveling, so he may join us maybe in some minutes. And with that, then we will move to conservation of biodiversity in the field. And I like to ask Irina Onufrenia, working for many, many years on wildlife issues and specifically in the Arctic in different organizations and currently in Nature and People Foundation, to tell us the practical work you are doing on some Arctic species, also with some local communities, as actually work in the Arctic without working with local communities, with indigenous peoples, is actually not effective. So, Irina, we are happy to
Просто держать, да?
learn more. Yeah.
Слышно меня? Hello to everybody. I will have my presentation will be about the practical issue. It's like not so theoretical because our organization quite young. We just about 1 year, but we have old traditions. So I will tell about more about practical things that we try bring from the research to the field of action. And here I will talk about 2 species, polar bear and walruses, and 2 reasons, because first of all, they are in Arctic, and second, they very much depends from the climate change and from the ice. We talk everywhere in the biodiversity congress, climate congress about the climate change, but these animals unfortunately cannot talk and they cannot do much, so they just living in a new home. And one of our goal is to help them adapt to this situation and to bring their voice to the people. So one of our main goal is not just do scientific research, so we try bring our research data to the field of action immediately, because it's we know that often the research going years and years and they never come to the decision in an area where is people live or where is a company working or where is something developed. So first of all, I want to talk about walrus monitoring and conservation. I will talk about walrus in Laptev Sea. It's some people say it's a subspecies of walruses. Some think it's just population of Pacific walrus. So in 2022, it was tagged 14 animals in a Laptev Sea. And there was quite successful project. So tags working a long time, about 6 months, and we have very good data about how walruses behave during summertime and during the winter time. This was first time for the many years, and we have a lot of new ideas about Laptev walruses. So here you can see the Green points is when walruses are located, you see, good, on the land. Blue is the water, and the white one is on the sea, or sorry, on the ice. So this how ducks looks like. So, and this is the result. The Olga uses map too. So you can see in the left picture that this is the area that was recognized by a Russian scientist in 2020 as important area for conservation. And 2022, in the right picture, you can see the tagging of these walruses show us the same area as mostly the scientists and animals recognize the same area as important for future conservation, or for the look to this area with special attention. This is halibut were recognized in 2022 by the tagging, and we have a new halibut, and the yellow one, it was data from 1960. So we mostly see all halibuts located in the same area. So the walruses are like the area. It's not many of them where they can locate it, but some, unfortunately, probably we lost, or maybe it's not enough data. We're still hoping that maybe if we have more data, they will show us the same halibut. Other important things for the future decision is the first two pictures. You can see that walruses are not moving much. So this in a ice-free period, yeah, the only one crazy animal went to New Siberian island. We're still guessing for what, but all others stay around the place where there was tagging. It's Taimyr Peninsula. And other things is the deep of the sea. So we can see that most of walruses in the left pictures stay in a not deep sea, yeah? So they probably, again, only one guy or girl went to the deep area, is like 1,800 meters. So why it's important for us? So it's important because we understand that halibut is the one platform for walruses to rest during the free ice period. I will show you this, but I probably will not read this. But what I want to say that all this data give us information to think that when we plan our activities, especially shipping or tourism, we should be really careful about the walruses halibuts and about the area, because they very specific and they stay in these halibuts for the long time. And unfortunately, it's not a big area and we cannot move them anywhere. Yeah, so the shipping should move, not walruses. And it's very clear from this research, and we discuss it with Moscow State University Research Center. Yeah, so but it's very, very clear from the scientific research. Next element is a polar bear. It's again monitoring, conflict resolution, and conservation. I will talk here more about the conflict resolution, because a lot of research going on in Russian Arctic and the whole Arctic about polar bear, but they are mostly academic. And they don't have big connection with the people on a place in a field, or to it's not help to do some action. So my presentation will be more about conflict resolution and conservation bears through this conflict resolution. So for many years, the society is recognized that the conflict going increase. And it's, of course, is one of the main reason is the climate change. and the more and more people appear in Arctic. What we count as a conflict. So there is a different description for this in a different country of the Arctic or a different country of the world. So we count as a conflict all interaction between polar bear and humans. It doesn't matter if someone was killed or injured, that if the bear appear around the people, it's for us, we count as a conflict. Again, for many years, we talk about the conflict, but it's we never have a strategy how to mitigate this, how to do the less risk for polar bear and for people. So we start do the database about all possible conflict in the Russian Arctic. It's not easy because it's no official information about this. And so we collect this data from the different sources like internet, like local communities, official working group that organized by Ministry of Natural Resources. So, and we collect information for the 3 years, and it's 351 conflict that happens between polar bear and people. This is how they located. So most of conflict happens in Chukotka region, because it was always like this. Always polar bear came to Chukotka. But it happens more and more because the ice melting. We can see that it depends from the year to year, so it's not like grow. Because like 2022 was very bad for ice. Ice a long time not appear in the right places. So it was a lot of polar bear around the settlements in Chukotka and even in the other areas. This is cases when the polar bear or people was killed or injured, or there was killed some dogs or reindeer or something, or the polar bear was put to the zoo or removed from one place to another place. Here we analyze why it happens. So you can see that in local settlement, the polar bear appear most often, but it's not so many problem with this. In the same is going on with the meteorological station. In reindeer herders, rotation camps, it happens not so often, but it's very often it's have a bad result. Why it happens? Because in a local settlement or meteorological station, it's a normal. People know what to do. Polar bear appear quite often. People trained and have a plan how to behave as a polar bear appear. For this new group, or for these two groups, this is a new problem. Polar bear just start appear here because it's a climate change, because no ice. People are not ready to meet with them, and they don't know what to do, as they don't have enough the skills to protect themselves or to prevent a polar bear conflict. So what we start to do, the first of all, of course, conservation of the polar bear habitat. It's like protected areas or other effective conservation measures. Second one, it's work very well. We have 6 bear patrol in the Russian Arctics, and it's for the moment is the best approach to avoid a conflict. So we keep training them, and we keep to increase the number of the polar bear patrol in a different settlement. And now we start a big program to teach people in the rotation camps and the reindeer herders in different villages where is the polar bear not so often in a different region of the Arctic. and it has a good success and lots of positive result even after 1 year of work. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. Thanks a lot for this practical examples working on very much flag species for the Arctic, whether we are talking about polar bear or walrus. And it's also a good combination of really hard science, I would say, and scientific research, but also practical thing, working also at a local level with local communities, and practical actions in terms of protection and conservation of those species. So with that, we'll move. Halder, do we have Halder? No? No. Okay. Irina Fitzgerald from Norilsk Nickel. I will not ask you to tell us the story with the Norilsk Nickel polar bear. So that will be probably a good and very good related issue and example, but rather actually coming back to the work of the company as a responsible company, dealing with the issue which is not that much common, even not in scientific world, I would say, at least not in Russia. And I hardly remember any, or at least not many other companies dealing with the issue. And the issue is ecosystem services. When we are talking about biodiversity, we always talk about ecosystem services and ecosystem functions. And if we like to bring biodiversity closer, sometimes even to the heart of some people, but probably also closer to financial interests of some companies and specific interests and of not only companies, but the government as well. So sometimes it's better to talk on the same language, and the language is very often the financial language, the language of budgets, the language of money, the language of profits and services. So that will be really interesting to know the approach company is taking on ecosystem services, how you see them, why company is doing that at all. So why there is an interest, and how far you advanced now in this work.
Actually, we look on ecosystem services from the point of view like values. And this is what I want to talk about values of nature to people. Of course, we are all human material creatures, so we call this benefits. Intangible and tangible benefits deriving from nature. And yes, we have special term for this, ecosystem services. So we have a very, very wide range of ecosystem services. That's okay. That might be split to 3 categories, maybe provisioning ecosystem services, like ability to produce meal, like berries, mushrooms. Second one, they're not supporting and maintenance ecosystem services that, for example, ability to support the same stable climate on the region. And of course, culture ecosystem services more close, in our opinion, to the word values. And yes, company provided this ecosystem services assessment, but I want to put attention to the one stage of ecosystem services assessment, and it's beneficiaries' opinions collecting. Yeah. We want to know what people think about nature, and we did this assessment into Norilsk region, that in Taimyr Peninsula. These facilities on land, but also have a harbor in our chain, producing chain. And We also provided this ecosystem services assessment at Kola Peninsula. That is very, very deep on land territories close to the Finland and Norway. So what we can see, actually benefits from ecosystem services are quite the same in this both regions. Maybe for all benefits, it depends just only from where to get energy. As a way to get energy. But as the company, we also separate and 5 high priority ecosystem services. What we've seen that mostly is those ecosystem services that helps us to measure our effectiveness of measure be provided by our environmental strategy or environmental plans and programs. And it's also quite the same in another region, and also that helps to understand effectiveness of our measures. For example, this might be an ability of air to dissolve pollutions or filtration of air, the same as water bodies. But what I want to say about people and local communities, including indigenous people. Everywhere, ecosystem services and benefits and meaning of nature the same. Or it's Taimyr Peninsula, close to Yakutia, or it's Kola Peninsula, the same. They all say about that they have free provision, like berries, mushrooms, aquatic culture, like aquatic bioresources. And doesn't matter if this sea aquatic resources or it's fresh water, they use fish for feeding themselves. And they say that nature have a matter for them from the point of view to recreation, from the tourism points of view, and everywhere where is local communities and especially indigenous peoples also is sacrificing meaning. And I collect some opinions on this presentation. In case if you're interested, you might look at this. And they repeat each other but different words. Maybe somewhere where is nature. Okay, so what I want to say to summary, the meaning of nature for people who live on Russian Arctic are the same everywhere. That's what I want to say. And of
Thank you, Irina. Again, I think that's a very interesting approach when you are not only doing, again, the assessment of ecosystem services, let's say through researchers or contractors, but coming to people. Because probably the whole idea of ecosystem services need to be not only close to the, let's say, budgets and billions or trillions of dollars, if they are monetized, but also to the people. And very often they're intangible, and some of them you can't really monetize. That's actually intrinsic value of certain things. Or if you are talking, I saw on your slides, there was also the element related, for example, to have a quality opportunity for a quality rest after the work. So you probably hardly can monetize it. Yeah. But it stays very close to the beliefs and emotions of people. And the way you come to people to ask, that's of course a very interesting and I think very positive way to do that, with this kind of a more humane move.
yes, you're absolutely
Yeah.
right, Alexander.
Yeah.
For social responsible companies is the first value of nature and ecosystem services as people.
Not people. Yeah, thank you. So, colleagues, do we have a Halder? Halder, can you hear us? Do you have now the technical opportunity to speak?
Hey, yeah, I'm finally
Yes,
online.
Halder. Oh, great to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's just the connection is very fragmented, but right now I have connection, so I'll try to use it. Well, it's a pleasure to be able to address you a little bit, and I just want to first tell you a little bit about Arctic Portal and what it is we do. And yeah, please put up the slideshow. It's good. We have been working on Arctic issues for a very long time. We were actually welcomed in a ministerial declaration in Svalbard in 2006. And since then, we've been working on various research and outreach activities. We currently host and support many of the key actors in the Arctic. This includes the International Arctic Science Committee, APEX, PAC, many of the activities of the University of the Arctic, the Arctic Yearbook, etc., etc. And also some of the working groups of the Arctic Council were actually in a way funded by us in the beginning. Both the staff of PAIM and CAF are former employees of the Arctic Portal, and I'm proud to have helped train many of them. And we also have substantial projects, of course, in when it comes to permafrost, because we developed the GCMP database on permafrost, and we still host it. So most of the permafrost data of the world is hosted by us and supported by us. And then lastly, we are currently working on a substantial project on Arctic energy, which and all these things, of course, connect. Apart from that, we work with many international players that have direct or indirect stakes in the Russian Arctic. This includes the Polar Research Institute of China. We've been working with them for a long time, and we are working with the Sun Yat-sen University on their the third icebreaker that actually came up to the Bering Strait this summer, and the plan is to potentially operate it out of Iceland in the years to come, and do research that would then go up to the Russian Arctic. And then we also work very closely with COBRI and KMI in Korea, to name some. So that's just to give you a little bit of a background. That we have data management systems, and we've been working on data management and outreach for a long time. And if you know the Arctic Risk Project, the tools they are using are developed by our team. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll try to keep it short while I'm connected. You have seen that image, of course, before, and I just wanted to highlight it again because it's never mentioned enough. We have different parts of the Arctic. There are different definitions of the Arctic, but it is all interconnected, and we have a lot of diverse yet fragile biodiversity in the Arctic region. Let's go to the next one. This is another one that needs to be also mentioned again and again. The area is definitely an area of opportunity and challenges and threats. We are witnessing climate change, of course, at a rate that is unprecedented. And at the same time, we know that the resources are very, very lucrative, because it's probably 30% of the unused resources of the globe. So I think it's not a question of if, but when they need to be used. And then, of course, there are other strains that are coming in. Arctic shipping, of course, in a global context, tourism, etc. Let's go to the next one. And we have good monitoring going on in certain factors of Arctic issues. One of them, of course, is sea ice monitoring. And there are quite many parties now monitoring the sea ice, but what we know is that there's sea ice, of course, in the winter, and we have seen, not least in Iceland, we've seen severe weather patterns that are changing. But then at the same time, the ice mass is shrinking, and this, of course, creates concerns about the pH level of the ocean, and salinity of the ocean, and water levels, of course, etc. So there's a lot of changes going on that need to be monitored. Let's go to the next one. We have many clear definitions in the Arctic. Yeah, next please. Okay, yeah. So we have many clarified issues and codes of conduct already in place. We have the Arctic Council agreements on search and rescue, emergency preparedness, and then also on scientific collaboration. As Alexander mentioned before, there are of course issues with the Arctic Council, but they're becoming more open, and that's to be cheered. And then of course we have the IMO Polar Code, and let's go to the next one. That also we have of course the emerging issues that are going to come into the discussion. And this map shows you the Northeast Atlantic Fisheries Commission, the NEF, and the high ocean, of course, and other fishing aspects are of a great concern that need to be brought into the discussion. And you see how it aligns with the economic area of Russia, of course, and given the prospects of climate changes, this is going to become more and more important to monitor how invasive species, how permafrost thawing may affect the pH level of the ocean, etc., etc. So it just becomes more and more complex. I think that's the only issue. Let's go to the next one. If you were watching the presentation yesterday, so that we have a
Calder, do we lose a connection? Yes, we did. So we can wait for a couple of minutes if connection can be restored. Okay, maybe we will wait for the next time when we can hear more on other specific products coming from the Arctic portal. But I hope that we got at least some impression what kind of information is there. And Arctic portal is working for many of years, so it has a very good range of information related not only to nature, but also to some social and development issues in the Arctic. So we have a little bit of time, so we'll be happy if presenters may have questions to each other, as well as, of course, we have people in the audience. Oh, I see. Fantastic. So definitely, please have a question. Irina, can you pass?
I have a question to the presentation about the polar bears. I'm from Arkhangelsk region, and yesterday I read the news in our regional portal about the appearance of a bear patrol in our region. So I would ask you, did you take into account in the project that bears often come to people because in these locals we have very bad waste management system and many landfills? And have you include a recommendation to your project to prevent meetings with bear and avoid landfills in these places where bear live and people lives?
Yes. Yeah, we have a good guidelines that include all this different recommendation and about garbage and how to behave when you meet a polar bear. But unfortunately, from our experience, when you just read the book, it not help much when you really meet a polar bear like face by face. So we do courses and theory and practice in a different region to teach people how to behave, so they can try different option, what they should do. They can feel how they will feel when they really see the polar bear. And we have, if it's a local communities or local settlement where the people live all the time, we have we can bring people from the polar bear patrol from Chukotka, where they have a very good experience, so they can teach local people who live in a different region. We have this experience too, yeah. And unfortunately, the in Arkhangelsk region is not many of them, but they appear more and more every year. Same like in Nenetsky Autonomный Okrug.
Thank you, but I will probably push you a little bit, because the question was about waste management and landfills and connection with the human polar bear patrol conflicts. So can you comment on that?
We have recommendation what to do with waste, definitely, but it's unfortunately it's not so easy issue in Arctic, very expensive. So someone should pay for this, government or companies. But it's these things should move forward definitely, because it's a bigger problem, because even people, even polar bears came to the waste in local villages or in a place where is a different place. After this, they learn how have a easy food, and they start walking around in tundra. And for example, now the reindeer herders have a problem with these bears who came from the settlement, because they know if there is a people, it should be easy food around. So yeah, it's the biggest problem, and the government work with this too, because it's now our Ministry of Nature Resources had a big problem about a big program, sorry, not problem, program about polar bear patrols. So, and the waste, management of waste is one of the biggest problem, most expensive, let's say.
Thank you. Any other questions? So again, to each other?
Maybe someone have suggestions what to do with this problem from this audience. Okay. Yeah.
I'm from Russian Social Ecological Union, and we have in this union, I'm like a head of the program, Zero Waste program of this union. So we make some recommendations for municipalities, how to make a good waste management. And we make this recommendation for little settlements, like villages in our region. So I can share, of course, because I'm very deep in this problem, and let's work together with the civil society. I think that in government, we should, like in government level, we should make a program to prevent waste. It should be about our laws, and make a program about the separate waste collection, because it's really possible. Most people think that it's very expensive and it's very difficult, but it's really possible, and we make it in very far villages, like villages near the White Sea in the Onega Peninsula. And if we want, we can make it. So, but of course, the burning waste, it's not a decision for this problem, but the prevention of waste and separate waste collection and I forgot the word. Maybe I can speak in Russian a little bit. Or you're not from the Russia? Okay. So I just can share the big investigation about this problem, and with с решениями, в общем. Большой документ с решениями, я могу его просто вам отправить.
Спасибо за вопрос. Thanks a lot for your question and for raising the super important issue of waste. Overall, but definitely also in the context we discussed in terms of polar bear human conflicts. So any other questions? Yes, please. Can you pass the microphone?
Hi there. My name is Marissa Bax, and I'm a researcher in Greenland, but I also work with the Global Ocean Observing System and the Biology and Ecosystems panel. And so there's a huge drive to have, data go into globally useful data sets, but also there's a need for Arctic locations like Greenland and Russia would have shared populations. And so I just wondered what your ideas were in terms of, sort of barriers and limitations, but also opportunities for data sharing that could be more informative outside of Russia.
Maybe I may say a few words about it. It's not easy for we discuss it's very wide in Russia, and it's even problem inside of the country because we have a different owners of the data, and the most of project that I showed was were from different supported by different companies, and with Russian legislation we have owners of data, so it's we need to share it, and we need to make an the common system of this data. And the presentation of Halder that tragically split it was about this because the Arctic portal is a huge portal that shares data from all over the Arctic, and we have like a white thing here in the Russian Arctic, but we're working on it, and we hope that it will be possible for maybe not the whole data, but biodiversity data. Definitely we need to share, and we try to do it in like circles, and maybe Alexandra may say more about it, but we work on it. Thank you.
I also want to say that mostly companies are those who ask to do this work. Yeah. So many companies share with data because of they need to be transparent. And for example, our company in Arnica, we published results of our beacon survey. It was biodiversity survey, like baseline, and we placed a report and just like a presentation about a big scientific expedition in Arctic, 3 regions, and it's on our official site. Also, you might find many data, but it's spread for many scientific publishings in scientific magazines. Now it's maybe the only one decision to find it.
I can add a few words. On governmental level, it's established now the Geo portal online source named Environmental Protection in Russia for all regions, not only for Arctic, but for all regions. And there are different source of informations, and it will be conducted in 6 years because it's so a huge data source, and it will be with different type of connections. It will be available and free online, free of charge.
And I think in a modern situation, it's a bit complicated to change information with the international society. But I think maybe Sasha can think maybe it's easy to do through Arctic Council or some official bodies, because it's not so much connection now between Russia and other Arctic countries. But we have some open information that we are kind of ready to share with international society.
This information is not all of this information is closed. Many of them are open, but they are in Russian. That's a great opportunity to learn Russian.
Commercial companies usually produce reports on both languages. Those companies who work worldwide, usually.
Yeah, I want to say the same, that we have sustainable reports about companies' activities. So it's annual reports every year, and huge companies like Nornickel and Rosneft and Rosatom make these reports, and this is a source of the information too.
Yeah, I have just two small questions. First for Irina, you've presented just two wonderful cases. How do you think whether it's possible to expand the scope of your projects and increase their number? Are there obstacles that you're confronted with, and what needs to be done in terms of assistance? And the second question is for Irina, how to motivate businesses to have in mind to take into account biodiversity issues while elaborating corporate strategies?
Yeah, I think it's no problem to extend them. So we have Russian tags now to do the tagging of viruses, and we very close to do this for the polar bear. We have good experience with training people. We have a lot of support from the all Arctic region. And I say it's only one problem is the money. So then more money, then more project we can do. And general other problem, of course, is not so many experts. Yeah, so we have some expert in Moscow, and it's very few in the regions. But for the last year, we do a lot of research, and a lot of people are ready to study and spread this experience, at least the polar bear in the whole Arctic. With walruses, it's more complicated because it's a big expedition. But again, inside the North route monitoring, I think is everything. This kind of work is possible because it's really good, give very fresh information about what's going on in the sea.
Your question, second question was to me or to Irina? To me, okay. I think that we can share our opinion. Me as a consultant, Irina is a company itself. First of all, the great empowering for every businesses can make the proper legislation. If we have laws and directions, other legal acts would give the instructions for the businesses how to monitor, how to indicate the direct, indirect zones of their impacts, and indicators, targets, disclosures, other issues. It's I think 80% of success, and the next 20% of success is the international best practice, because the companies, they should be so strong on international markets, and they use all the opportunities to make them stronger and involve into this process and biodiversity, ecosystem services, climate agenda. First of all, for them, that's they start from the business reasons, and after they improve their minds, it's for them most their responsibility.
As to me, so I can say that as more clients interested in data, in sharing data, as more clients interested in anything else, for commercial companies is the main reason for everything.
Thank you very much. And I see that Halder is back. Halder, we moved in our discussions. Halder, can you hear us? Да. Коллеги, спасибо огромное за сессию, спасибо за участие, за интересные доклады, за вопросы и ответы. Поэтому всем удачи. И еще раз, я думаю, у нас будут возможности обсуждать ряд вещей, и будучи уже на других площадках дома в Москве. Главное, что много интересной, хорошей работы. И надо эту работу по возможности не только ей делиться, да, но и очень часто собирать вместе, чтобы была некая общая картина. Ну как, у нас есть эксперты, у нас есть компании, у нас есть консалтинг, у нас есть наука. Все вместе вполне. Вот. Спасибо еще раз. И отдельное спасибо Северному форуму за то, что предоставил нам площадку и возможности для таких обсуждений. Спасибо.